Now, the BJP has reignited the Katchtheevu debate by accusing the Congress and the DMK of betraying the country. Under what circumstances did India give up its claim to the island? What did it gain in return? Let's hear it from the experts. Joining me right now on the telecast is Mukul Rohatgi. He is the former Attorney General of India. And let's quickly get some answers from him. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mukul Rohatgi. And of course, my first question to you, under what provisions could Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of the country, have ceded an Indian territory to another country?
See, under the Constitution of India, this would amount to altering the boundaries of India, including boundaries of a state. So, in view of the constitutional provisions, you require an amendment of the Constitution so that the amended boundaries, after you give away something, are then put in place. This requires an elaborate amendment of the Constitution under Article 368, which requires ratification by both houses of the Parliament. Also, it requires consent of the state legislature in respect of which state some boundaries being ceded. So it is not merely an executive act of a government to, have an agreement with a foreign government and say some part of India now belongs to another country. And as far as I understand, my memory, if it is correct, it appears that there was no such procedure which was followed in 1974, and soon thereafter came the emergency, and the whole thing then, kind of went out of focus.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, were all constitutional protocols followed in this case?
As I told you, I don't think they were followed. In my answer to your first question, I clearly said it requires an amendment of the Constitution because the boundaries will change. And therefore, it requires a nod of Parliament, which wasn't there.
Right. Now, what territorial and economic zone issues did this create impacting our fishermen today?
Oh, well, it will create a lot of practical difficulties. It is, in fact, creating practical difficulties. You see, the distance between the tip of India and Sri Lanka is not more than 60, 70 or 80 kilometers. And this particular island lies at our door. It's only about 25, 30 kilometers from, the edge of India. Therefore, apart from the fact that it is very critical, because it's at our doorstep near Rameshwaram, there are issues of economic maritime zones, which every country has got the right to fish in waters and other things, or to look for minerals or oil or other things in economic zones. Now, this being, ceded to Sri Lanka, we will not have traditional fishing rights also around this area. And I find, from whatever I have seen, that our fishermen are, regularly being taken captive and stopped by the Sri Lankan Navy in this behalf, and therefore we are pretty much at a disadvantage in respect of all this.
Now, can the ceding of our territory be reversed by any way?
See, reversal can only happen on a bilateral negotiated basis between two sovereign nations. As I said earlier in another interview, some cases and litigation is pending in the Supreme Court in this behalf. But the point is, whatever our court may say, it applies to, India. The judgment of the court in India does not extend extraterritorially to another country. So basically, as far as I see, it can only be a negotiated settlement by sitting across with Sri Lanka, and maybe some give and take, some barter, that we can get our land back, and maybe in lieu we can give some rights to them, but then that would be a part, I think, only of diplomacy.
Now, can the current government take action to get back the ceded territory?
See, as I told you, the action can only be as a measure of diplomacy between two sovereign nations. By sitting across the table and telling them that what happened in 1974 was not valid, was not legal, in accordance with the laws of India, and it has created a great kind of a deficit for India. It was not okay. So let's try and have a look at it again, and maybe you give us our island back, and we give you some rights, some other rights, etc. So it can only be a negotiated settlement, as I said.
What is your opinion, sir, when the current government raises this issue now, when elections are on the anvil, and could action not have been taken earlier by the government in the course of its 10 years of leadership?
See, that I can't answer. It depends on how and why it is raised, but it is certainly an important issue. So I'm not wanting to cast any blame on one or the other, but the fact remains that if land of this country is ceded to another nation, India is entitled to know why it was ceded. What did we get in return? I can understand barters. There have been barters in the past. We had a barter with Pakistan soon after partition. That is logical because you have some enclaves where people of that country are living and some enclaves where Indians which has fallen to India are living in the other part. You can have a barter. So there is a reported judgment of the Supreme Court called the Berubari case, where a barter did happen, and the Supreme Court has a point in that judgment, which is a judgment on a presidential reference made to the Supreme Court by the then President of India. And the Supreme Court clearly said that the barter could only be, after approval by Parliament. It cannot be just by an agreement between two heads of state, etc. So, it has been raised today or whatever is for the parties to answer why they have raised it, but it is certainly an important question.
Now, according to you, does the Congress's argument hold when it says that the BJP has ceded territory to China in Galwan and is instead pointing fingers at Congress over this entire Katchtheevu row?
I am not an expert on that, but from whatever I have read, I don't think the government of India has ceded anything in Galwan. Galwan was a bitter skirmish, there was a bitter fight, many people from our side died, many people from the other side died. There's no question of ceding any territory. I don't think that's a correct allegation at all.
What in international law allows India to try and settle maritime disputes?
So maritime disputes can be settled, but as I told you, internationally it's not that easy because the International Court of Justice, its judgments cannot be implemented unless both the states agree. It is a consensual jurisdiction. It is not like a jurisdiction of the Indian Supreme Court which binds everybody in India whether you like it or you don't like it. So it can be done, but basically whether it is done under a maritime agreement or whatever it is, the best thing is to sit across the table and hammer out a solution. Call it by whatever name you want, but it has to be a bilateral situation.
Now, what is the difference between territory forcibly being occupied, like in POK, and ceding territory, like the Katchtheevu issue that has now been raised?
See, POK is a historical thing which has happened because in 1948, the Pakistani army was aiding the raiders, as they were called, who swept from the heights into Kashmir and took away a large portion. There was definitely a weak response by the then government to protect its territory, and unfortunately a large part of J&K is now called POK, though it belongs to India. Now, as you have noticed, that happened in 1948. Now we have not been able to get it back because it's now a part of the other country. So that's the historical thing. And I don't think it's very easy for government of India to get it back, because I don't think it's possible to have a bilateral discussion on that now. But as far as Galwan is concerned, I repeat, I do not think that the government of India has ceded any territory whatsoever to China. In fact, as I said, we have tension in Galwan in the northeast because of that, and the Chinese and the Indian troops are standing eyeball to eye, looking eyeball to eyeball. But as far as this issue of ceding the island to Sri Lanka is concerned, it appears to me that it was ceded without really much cause. Maybe the then government wanted to have some kind of better relation with Sri Lanka, and it thought that this island was completely insignificant. It's only about 200 acres, and therefore if you give it away, not much is going to, be felt as a loss to India. I don't know what the reason was, but it seems to me that it was a blunder. It should not have been done without taking the public of this country into confidence. And public of this country in confidence means the confidence of both houses of parliament and the state legislature. This was not done, and therefore we have lost a part of our territory, and especially which sits at our door, being close to Rabeshwaram. That's my feeling.
Now, if there is an anomaly that is found in the mechanism which with the ceding of territory was done, who can be held accountable and under what grounds?
Now it's like 50 years down the line. You can hold the then government, the then Congress government, to be accountable. But then what will accountability do? All the people who were there, mostly they have passed away. They may not be there, but what is it going to fetch us? It's not like, doing a case against somebody to try and recover. If somebody has looted the nation, you try and recover those things. Now, once this has happened, the only way to kind of reverse it is to sit across with the other sovereign government and try and hammer out a solution. That's all.
Thank you, Advocate Mukul Rohatgi, for joining us on the telecast, sharing your views and legal expertise.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.